In this video, I'll be going through some of Python's built-in functions, in particular the ones that deal with numeric values. So these are absolute, power, range, round and sum. I'm going to go through each of the functions and then we will have a look at them in PyCharm. The first function is the absolute function, which returns the absolute value of a number. For positive numbers, it returns the number itself, while for negative numbers, it returns the number without the negative sign. And a use case for this is calculating the distance between points. Next is the power of function, and this returns the value of one value to the power of another value. The power of function returns the value of a number raised to the power of another number. It also has an optional third argument, which is the modulus value, and the modulus value helps to find the remainder of the division after raising a number to a power. And the use case I've got is compound interest calculations, but of course it can be used in many other mathematical computations such as exponential growth, physics and engineering, geometry and many other things. So I'm listing one use case for each of these just to give an example, but there are many other use cases. The range function returns a sequence of numbers. It accepts up to 3 arguments: start, stop and step. The sequence starts from start, stops before stop and increments by step. And a use case of where it's used is in batch processing in data analysis. Then we've got the round function, which rounds a floating point number to the number of decimals specified. By default, it rounds to the nearest integer if no decimals are specified. And a use case for this, actually I've got a few use cases, which is rounding to custom intervals, currency formatting and invoicing and billing. And the last one is the sum function. So the sum function calculates the sum of all items in an iterable, like a list or a tuple. It also accepts an optional second argument, which is an initial value to start summing from. And a use case for using the sum function is cumulative totals in games or applications. The first one is the absolute function, ABS, open parenthesis and closed parenthesis. And this returns the absolute value of a number, which means positive representation of the number we specify. The absolute value of a number is never a negative number. It can return the absolute value of the given number in integer, float or a complex number. So we have specified the absolute value function here and specified a negative number inside it, minus 321.25. And we are going to store this information inside my underscore ABS variable. And then we are going to print my variable. So let's print the file. And it turns it into a positive number, 321.25, which is the absolute value. So the absolute value is 321.25. And if you're wondering what the absolute value means, it refers to the number's distance from 0. And they are very much used in math and physics, especially when you need positive numbers and you cannot use any negative ones. So this is an instance of where you would use the absolute function. If we clear the screen, the next one is the to the power of function, which returns the value of one value to the power of another value. For example, 6 to the power of 3, which basically is 6 times 6 times 6. So here we can see its function has 6 to the power of 3 inside it, and we are going to print the variable my underscore pow. So let's run the file, and we can see 6 times 6 times 6 is 216. You can also add a third number in here, and if you add a third number or parameter, you can use the modulus operator. So let's put in 3 and run the file again, and this time we get a 0. Let's change that to something else like 7. And we can see this time we get a 6. Next, we will have a look at the range function, and the range function returns a sequence of numbers. You can also specify the increments, which is 1 by default, and you can also specify the numbers of where you want to start and stop. This one in particular works very well with the for loops, as we have seen in the previous videos on for loops. So this code will print the values of 2 to 9. So you always go one number above the last number you want to print. So that's why we have gone with 10. And if we want to increment by 2, we would add that as the third value as well. So we can do that here. Let's increment by 2 and let's run the file. So we can see 2, 4, 6, 8. If we remove this altogether and run the file again, this time it would print the digits 2 to 9. Incrementing by 1, which is by default. Or we can do something like print everything right up until the value of 15. So we can put 16 in here and then run the file again. Now we can see it's printed 0 to 15. And that's the range function. So let's clear the screens again and have a look at the round function. And the round function will round a floating point number to the number of decimals we specified. So I want to round this value here. Let's run the file. And it's rounded it by 3.82. So the one here, it's rounded up to 2. And the reason for that is because I've got 3 over here. So it's rounded across 3 digits. 1, 2, 3. But if we actually take this out, let's run the file again. And this time it's rounded 3 to 4. Maybe because 0.8 is closer to 4. So let's change this to 4. And it should round down to 3 now. So let's run the file again. And now we can see it's rounded down to 3. Actually, let's try 3.49. That should round it down. If we try 3.5, I think it should round it up, which it does. So the optional parameter is quite good. So we can do 5 instead. So this time it should round to the 5th digit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this one, 8, it should round up because the next value is 6. So let's have a go. 3.57687. So 6, it's rounded up to 7. Next we have the sum function. The sum function is the sum of all items added in an iterable. So objects like lists, tuples, sets, dictionaries, strings, all of these are called iterables. Let's take a look at an example and let's look at a tuple in particular. So let's create a tuple. So here is my tuple on the first line and we've got 195 inside my tuple. The next line we create a variable called my_sum, which equals our function, which is sum. And then inside our function, we're passing my_tuple within the function, which is the line above. And then we are printing my_sum to the console. So let's run the file. And we can see it's added these together. So it's given us 15 because 1 plus 9 plus 5 equals 15. Let's add 10 in there, which should now equal 25, and run the file again and it equals 25. So we can continue with this and it will keep adding them together. And this is why it's the sum of all items added in an iterable.